Okay, going to do a quick video here on using the bridge on some of the Game Boy options. Going to cover the Game Boy Advanced, and the Game Boy Color. So there is a cartridge, if you're not aware, that you can use on the Super Nintendo, as it has enough power to kind of run the Game Boy games. But if you've experienced it, you'll know very quickly that some of the Game Boy Color games, most all of them, won't run. It just doesn't have the power to do that. But I wanted to cover this one anyways. So if you wanted to use a controller other than the Super Nintendo, which I think most people would agree that's going to be a very rare case. But if you did, you could do that. And with the bridge, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how we can use the, just for an example, the PlayStation controller. So let's go ahead and pan over to the screen. Alright, so here we have the cart running, and then we have our PlayStation controller. So you can navigate through it just like you would on the Game Boy Advance. So let's go ahead and run a game here. Oops, wrong button. Okay. One thing I am going to note though, this did require a firmware change. The reason for that was some of these Super Nintendo, I don't want to call them hacks, additions, let's say additions. They'll do something a little extra. And give you three cases for that. One is the Super Nintendo mouse. Once the mouse runs the regular payload for the buttons, it runs an additional, what you would say, kind of like a clock, to pulse additional registers, and that's going to be the analog movement. And then in the same scenario, there was a guy that had invented rumble for the Super Nintendo. He kind of used that same technique, and then this cart does the same thing, but I have no idea why. So after it goes and it gets all the buttons, which you can see we have that all working here, it asks for an additional 16 bits, and I have no idea what that's for, and that broke the bridge. So those extra methods are detected, and once they're seen, they're either used or not used. In this case, they're not, and that allowed this game to start working. So if you are using the bridge to use different controllers on this Game Boy, the Super Game Boy, and it doesn't work, what you'll notice is it'll kind of have a rapid turbo functionality because every other packet's red. Just do the firmware update and you'll get the latest so that works. But I wanted to go ahead and just kind of show you that you can use that one. But we're going to move on to something here a little bit different. Let me go ahead and switch that over. Okay, I also wanted to cover the GameCube. There's that module that sits underneath. You can do the CD option or you can do the Swiss option. I do the Swiss option, and I use the 007 exploit to do that. Sorry about the camera angle, but see if we can see enough of the screen here. Okay, let me back up. Alright, so I have on here both the GBI interface, which we'll do first. Is it going to load? GBI, there we go. That's basically the same thing you get on that CD. So it allows you to interface with the hardware on the bottom. I don't have the Game Boy Advanced card in there. I got the Game Boy card in there. But as you can see, it's pretty much the same interface as before. It had the same strange issue, in this case a little worse with the leg. Get into that here a bit in a minute. But let's go ahead and just run a game here. What about Elmo? He didn't get enough attention. Okay, so basically this is identical. It's the same thing. It's just running on the GameCube, and in this case, you can actually run the color games. It has a little bit more power. So, but in this case, again, here we are. We're running just the regular PlayStation controller. Oh, we've had splash screen. Here we go. You can see that's functioning correctly, and there's happy little Elmo. All right, so. Let me go ahead and switch back to Swiss. 1 second. And for those that don't know, Swiss is a tool that you can run on the SD card, and you can get to it a few ways. There's a Pi option. There's game exploits and things like that, and it allows you to run homebrew games, and obviously ROMs right off the loader. There's also this EMGBA. This is an emulator, so it doesn't actually use the hardware, but plays games really well. So here's a Game Boy Advanced game running with that emulator. Again, using the PlayStation controller. Wrong buttons here. Okay. And there we have Mario doing his thing. Okay, so like I said, you could do the, from what I understand, you can do the Game Boy Advanced flash cart and run it through the hardware. The interesting thing with that module and the emulators and everything in general here is that the pull rate for the controller is a little faster than normal. It was so fast that the bridge couldn't keep up. So we had to make some changes. Again, just grab the latest firmware, and you'll be able to do that if you're running into those problems. Again, if you notice the game doing like a turbo thing, when the button gets pressed and released, that would be the symptom. Now there are going to be some controllers that aren't going to be able to handle that pull rate. Some of the bulky, awkward ones, like the 5200 controller, that takes a little longer to do what it needs to do. And like an Atmark Pippin controller, which takes a very long time to do what it needs to do. Most controllers in general are going to be under a millisecond or at a millisecond. Dreamcast, GameCube, PlayStation, things like that. So they're all going to work just fine. But there we go. I just wanted to cover some of the options for the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advanced to actually play and enjoy those on consoles. And now you can use any controller you want to use to play those games. So thanks for watching.